Kia ora, good evening. Hang on. Sorry. I just had a big swig of sparkling water before I hit record, and I'm really trying to watch McGee's. It's so embarrassing when I burp on air, but it's live, so, and I don't know how to edit anything out, so embarrassing. Interesting case. I only woke up a few minutes ago, causing political earthquakes is taking a lot out of me, but I've got my dinner cooking, so I'm going to do this while I'm waiting for the beep. Chris Thompkins. Oh, I'll have to check, see if it's Tompkin or Tompkins, but Chris Thompkins' disappearance. It's one that I have briefly mentioned before. It's one that I have made suggestions about what I thought happened to him before on other lives, especially in regards to African American men, especially in regards to the American South. But the interesting thing is, when I was investigating his disappearance with the new line of inquiry that I was, well, it's not a new line of inquiry, it's a line of inquiry that had always been in the back of my mind, but I had never put any real effort into it until now. And when I started going down that line of inquiry, interestingly, it ended up at Jeffrey Epstein and election fraud. Jeffrey Epstein is connected to election fraud. And if you remember the Epstein files where they tried to say that video footage of Zelensky and Epstein was fake, you know how X kept marking everything as fake, as they do. Nobody else marked it as fake. And then there was a barrage of people saying, no, it was AI, it was fake, it was fake, it was fake. However, Epstein was good friends with Zelensky. I'll get to everything in a minute, but you just have to bear with me because it's to do with, it's the back end of the comet that I'm getting to. And apparently the reason for the visit of Zelensky going to Epstein and the reason why Zelensky was in the files, the Epstein files, is because he was trafficking children and girls to America, and he was getting advice from Jeffrey Epstein about his election. And remember, he was mentioned in regards to election fraud. And then it ended up, while I was looking into Chris's disappearance, it ended up, I uncovered stuff that directly links Jeffrey Epstein to election fraud with Elon Musk. Jeffrey Epstein went to stay in Ukraine to visit Zelensky. So it's looking highly likely that Jeffrey Epstein had something to do with Zelensky's rigged election. He went to him for election advice. Zelensky went to Epstein for election advice. And then there's evidence of vote rigging. And that election advice and the vote rigging and the machines and all of that is linked right back to Elon Musk. And other people have gone into detail as to how they think Elon Musk did it in regards to stuff that Ashley St. Clair had said. So I've put the links in and I'll put some photos up. But, you know, the cult of Epstein, you know, the cult of Odin, and I'm getting to that as well because it does pertain to what I'm talking about with Chris. The cult of Odin, you know, the neo-Nazis and the prime ministers and presidents, you know, have gone all over that, are also the cult of Epstein. All the people that I talked about in regards to election fraud and vote rigging are all on the Epstein list. Every single one of them. So he was helping him and Musk were rigging elections. And then obviously when he quote unquote died, so there's no smoke without fire. So I've put the links to them in the description box below, and I'll put some pictures up as well that you're going to find really interesting. But it looks like I was absolutely 100% spot on about everything. Well, I mean, I know I was, but this means that they got Zelensky in by rigging the election in order to start a war with Russia. But he's not even legally the president now, because they never had an election. He halted all the elections. So it's basically he staged a coup against his own people. Like a dictator. He's a dictator. As is Trump and Starmer and all that. So the war between Ukraine and Russia was staged and faked against unelected, illegally put into power presidents and prime ministers of NATO and the EU and all of it. Quite the controversy. So I wasn't expecting a thread of all of that to lead to my investigation into Chris's disappearance. So let's just talk about Chris's disappearance. I always say that, when someone vanishes off the face of the earth, you always have to think logically. They're trying to say, there's people saying it was paranormal, there's people saying it was alien abduction, there's people going down the whole absolutely ridiculous paths, because some people, when there's no obvious answers, they go to the inobvious, and their minds get carried away with them. So I've just watched this video with the link right at the bottom in the description box of this guy who has uncovered new information in regards to him. And I always said, when it comes to African American boys, men, especially in the South, there's more going on than meets the eye, especially if they vanish off the face of the earth. Because if they vanish off the face of the earth, they either had help getting disappeared, or they took them underground. And in 2002, he was working on with the 3 other people to do, surveying of the roads and stuff. And someone who was with him at the time, his name was Randy, who was working with him at the time, mentioned something really interesting. He said that at one point when they were driving to the location in Georgia, Chris was looking out the window really intently at something, and it's like he was almost not hypnotized, but intently focused on something out the window. And when Randy said, "Who are you looking at?" or "What are you looking at?" or something, he just kind of was like, "Oh, yeah, no, it was just my mind was wandering." And then they go out and they're doing their thing, putting rods in the ground and, doing all the kind of road surveying, or, surveying in the forest and that. And then apparently Chris and somebody else there, they were pissing each other off. And then all of a sudden, this guy Randy said, Chris bolted. This is new information that's come to light, because all we knew previously was that they were walking, they turned around, Chris was gone, there was a boot on the ground, there was some material on a fence, money was found, his other boot was found, quite a bit away, and nobody knew anything after that. Now, this new video has kind of given me more information to go on. I've done some further digging, and now I'm utterly convinced. I'm pretty sure I have a good idea of what happened to him, and this is common with African American men especially. When it comes to the cult the cult of Odin, when it comes to when you look at who the members are in the cult of Odin, a lot of them are in the KKK. And this is pertinent because apparently when they were out searching for him, somebody came up to the family and said, be careful, they kill people around these parts. Now, I always say, when the cops don't investigate, when the cops cover everything up, you have to question who is involved and why. And Chris was from Columbus, Georgia. And Jeffrey Epstein, Columbus, Georgia, is mentioned over 115 or 125 times in the Epstein files. And he donated money to universities in Georgia and all different institutes in Georgia. And one of the reasons being is when it comes to African American men that go vanishing, it's either for one of a couple of... it's for one of like 3 or 4 things, right? The first one is medical experiments. They take them, they kidnap them, and they use them for medical experiments. The second one is for breeding. They take their DNA. If there's certain qualities that they like about them, they'll take their DNA and use them for eugenics programs, because they do that a lot with Indigenous people as well. Because African Americans, to these people, have absolutely zero value. But if they're very athletic, or they like the shape of their body, or they have a certain intelligence or a certain skill or a certain gift, they'll try to mess with their genetics and that for eugenics, their eugenics program. And the fourth one is for sacrificing, especially hunting parties. If they are a lot of these victims for hunting parties, if they're adults in that, they're usually like, you know, Van Damme's Hard Target and that, veterans, or they're athletics, they played basketball, they played football, or, you know, and they see them as a challenge. So they let them run through the forests and then they hunt them down. Now, the fact that when they went to investigate, when he went missing, when he took off into the forest, people who were in the land surrounding where he went missing refused to let anyone go through their barns and, you know, look in certain areas. They never found any blood. They only found a boot. It looks like where they dumped his boot and the money, and that was definitely to put them off the scent. And then the police just didn't investigate it. And the guy who made the video said that when he contacted them to ask them questions about the investigation, they had no knowledge of his disappearance. So when the police are covering it up, that means that they were either involved, or they're covering it up for someone in law or in government. And when you're talking about Georgia, you're talking about, you know, potentially KKK and white supremacy, neo-Nazi organisations. Jeffrey Epstein made donations to neo-Nazi KKK organisations. It's all in the description box. So one of two things happened. Either the people who were with him, because the interesting thing is that only one man stood up and said anything. However, there's something off a little bit about his testimony that he gave to the man making the video and his family. But if he's telling the truth, it sounds like Chris was hunted. He said they were walking, he looked up and Chris just bolted. So could it be what he saw out the window was who he knew was going to hunt him? Could there have possibly been some sort of secret deal where he was made money? If you escape, we'll give you this amount of money. And he thought, yeah, I can do it. Apparently he was quite a short wiry guy, they said that he was built like Prince, you know, from Raspberry Beret and Party Like It's 1999. So maybe he thought he could get away with it. Or the people that he saw when he lost his concentration in the truck, when he saw them in the forest, he knew he was in trouble and ran. And then, of course, they went after him and hunted him down, and then everyone covered it up because they're all in on those hunting parties. Now, the people that were with him, one of them has not only vanished off the face of the earth, but the guy making the video said it's almost like his whole persona was fake. There's no record of this man having ever existed, even though he had a name at the time of the disappearance. There's no, you can't trace anything about that name. Like he's been wiped from the records, which is suspicious. The other line of inquiry, because you always have to go down the road of logic first, but, you know, when you're bringing Jeffrey Epstein into it and the KKK, you have to look at the extreme of what could happen, but then look at, you know, the logical plausible, and that's that the people involved in the people there when he disappeared were involved in his disappearance. He was getting into little altercations with one of the men there. They didn't tell his mother that Chris had gone missing for nearly 4 hours, even though Chris's mother worked for one of the men who was there that day when he went missing. She was the babysitter for the guy and his wife. And it was actually the mother, being the babysitter, that got her son the job. And apparently they were annoying each other. They were pissing each other off. And there was mention of this guy having a weapon before they even got to the location. And they immediately, other than the guy Randy who told the story of what he knew of what he saw, the other two immediately lawyered up, which is even more suspicious. Why would you lawyer up if you've got nothing to do with this guy's disappearance? And that's what Randy said. I didn't get a lawyer because I didn't do anything wrong. But the other two, as soon as they got away from the location, they immediately got lawyers. And then the police covered it up. And when the police cover it up, there's more to this than meets the eye. Which makes me think, you know, okay, the people he was with that day may or may not have had something to do with his disappearance, but the reason for his disappearance has something to do with some sort of Georgia cover-up. And when you're looking at Georgia cover-ups, I always look at, like, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, and because what I was looking up was Jeffrey Epstein and Columbus, Georgia. And Columbus, Georgia is mentioned all over the Jeffrey Epstein files. And we know about the hunting parties. And they like to hunt African American men because they're so athletic. You know, basketball, football, that sort of thing. They're the thrill of the chase because they're wiry and fast and can turn on a dime and all of that. And I think that where they found his boot with the piece of clothing up against the barbed wire fence and the money in there, I think it was a ruse. I think he was driven from the location quite early on, especially if they shot him. I'm going to put some screenshots of comments in that are very interesting pertaining to him possibly being shot and the reasons why and who did it. And if they shot him and everybody was in on it, bar possibly the guy Randy, or maybe he did, and because there is some inconsistencies with some of the things he says, but you know, without him talking, without him being brave enough to say anything, I wouldn't have been able to connect the dots to my original hypothesis about his disappearance, and that was they took him, and they either took him underground or they, the people involved that day had help removing him. And there was like a road big enough for, well, like a track big enough for a car to go down. There weren't any reports of hearing gunshots or anything like that, but it doesn't mean to say they didn't use a silencer or some sort of muzzle or... But I think that they all know more than they're letting on. The other three that were there know more than they're letting on, and the fact that that man's name vanished off the face of the earth tells me that they knew what was going to happen to Chris that day. Maybe not Randy, but maybe he did. It's just that there's things that don't add up. A couple of just little minor things that don't add up about his testimony. But if he is telling the truth, then I'm inclined to think that my original hypothesis of what happened to him and who's responsible and why is spot on. And then the fact as well, because when I'm investigating it, it ends up leading me to articles about Epstein and Zelensky to do with elections, and Epstein and Musk and election fraud. It's almost like Chris was leading me, like, keep going, you're on the right track. They brought in bloodhounds. You know, they brought in trackers and that, and there was no scent, there was no trail, which is interesting if he supposedly took off running, because they would have been able to pick up on the scent trail, because they would have smelt the spike in adrenaline and cortisol, as well as his sweat. They would have been able to pick up on that, but the fact that the dogs had picked up on zero scent, and then the cops are denying having, you know, Chris who? It's only because the NAACP got involved that they even could be bothered trying to investigate everything. So I think, long story short, that he was either a victim of a Epstein-style hunting party, or they took him for one of the other three reasons. But I think that Jeffrey Epstein, I think the Georgia law enforcement, the government, the KKK, whoever is in law, because, you know, they're all, the KKK, it's made up of like cops and governors and senators and politicians and that. So I think that they knew he wasn't going to come back that day. I think they had a plan. And whether the people that were with him there that day knew it or not, I'm pretty sure at least one of them possibly did. But the fact that they lawyered up, the fact that the cops covered it up, the fact that they all went on to pretend like they didn't even know who he was. And then the other thing is, because I've mentioned this before, not only when the cops cover it up and pretend like who, but when they actively go out of their way to smear the name of the victim, that's when you know there's a cover-up. And they the cops immediately started going on about, and people started picking up with it and running, because you have to remember Jeffrey Epstein, he knows the people that run social media, he knows the people that control Google and Microsoft and all of that, and they fake stuff. I've just proven that. They will put up fake fact checkers and, fake information to draw people off the scent. They immediately started saying you probably went into the city and OD'd on meth. And Chris's family adamantly deny that he did drugs. He didn't drink. He kept himself very healthy. Apparently, he occasionally smoked weed, just like we all occasionally smoke weed. And that was it. But they immediately started saying, yeah, you probably OD'd on meth. The city got him, and trying to besmirch his name, and that's what they always do. Smear campaigns. They love a smear campaign. Don't I know it? I know people like Vladimir and King Charles and that know it too. And then, of course, you do your research online, and it's all filled with people filling you with misinformation and disinformation to put people off the scent. But I see right through the bullshit. And I have always said that Epstein video footage that they tried to say was AI generated fake of Zelensky and Epstein together is 100% real. Because apparently Zelensky went to him for help on what to do with the elections. Now, if Epstein was involved with rigging elections and election fraud with Elon Musk, there's every reason to believe that those photos are genuine. I've put the link in. I have caught X and Grok and that and AI and community notes lying about 4 times. I have actual documented proof that X lies in community notes. So don't believe everything that's been flagged as AI, because they are actively going around trying to cover up the lies. That's why Trump got them in their favour. That's why Starmer got them in their favour. Your Zuckerbergs and your Bezos and your Palantir and your Musks and Gates and that. That's why they got them in their favour, because they're using them to rewrite the truth, to change the truth into their truth, which is a lie. Because doppelganger, the battle of two worlds. There's one world that is in truth and justice, and there's the other world that they live in that is lies and injustice. So they try to turn the world of truth and justice into lies and injustice to control the narrative. And then in return, people like Trump and Musk and Zelensky and that let them steal the land, experiment on people, have the defence contracts, bring out pandemics, because we know that Zelensky has the biochemical weapons labs and that were creating all the pandemics and that as well. So, quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. This for that. If you do this for me, I'll do that for you. So unfortunately, after 24 years, Chris's family more than likely not going to have anything to bury. But because once they take their life, they'll use the body for all sorts of things. Sometimes they bury them, sometimes they use them for experiments, and unfortunately, now I know that Chris's family, that's not something that they would want to hear, but I really think that they need to go down this line of inquiry, especially for the fact that they were threatened. Be careful, people get killed around here. And then when you look at what I'm going to post in the post in regards to comments from this man's video, it looks very highly likely that it was some sort of neo-Nazi, white supremacist, Jeffrey Epstein, KKK, Proud Boy involvement connected to Epstein and all the rest of them. Wasn't Georgia was one of the states that was accused of election interference, wasn't there? So there's no smoke without fire, eh? I just wasn't expecting, when I was doing investigating Chris, that he would directly lead me to Epstein, Musk and election fraud accusations. So I'm going to go now and have my dinner. But all the links are in the description box below, connected to everything that I've just talked about, which has taken me further down the rabbit hole of election fraud and Elon Musk, but this time adding Jeffrey Epstein and bringing Zelensky back in on it. It's all connected. And if there's anyone out there who's African American, where their loved ones have vanished off the face of the earth, where there's no scent, where there's no trail, where the cops aren't doing anything, now you know the line of inquiry to go down, and with all my heart I am so sorry. And if you want me to look into your loved one's case, just email me. I will be more than happy to look at your loved one's case, whether they disappeared or whether you don't agree with the coroner's report or anything like that. Just email me. It's in the link in the description. God, it's because I'm getting hungry. My email is in the description box. And you can email me and I'll look into it. If they've vanished off the face of the earth, or you don't agree with the coroner's report or the police findings or the court findings, I'll look at it for you. But I'll be 100% honest, and if I can't pick up on anything, I won't pick up the case. But I will absolutely help you out any way I can. So I'm going to go, and I'll speak to you later. I've done what I was sent to do. Ka kite. Mwah.